Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents. When you think of the word home, hopefully you think of warm memories and good times. But what happens if where you reside doesn't necessarily evoke those feelings? Our guest, Jonathan Zeichner, really wants to make sure that youth in South Central Los Angeles know that they have a place called home. Nice to have you here. It's a great name for an organization. It's a great name for a place, but how did a place called home come into being?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Maria. Thanks for having me. Well, a place called home, now in its 26th year in 2019 of serving South Central. It started a year after the unrest of '92 and was founded by a pretty remarkable woman named Deborah Constance. And Deborah herself had really struggled growing up. She lived in an abusive household and gone on as an adult to struggle with addiction and I guess a sense of not really knowing where she belonged and where she could be useful. So she went to her boss one day. She had seen an article in the LA Times about a teacher at Jefferson High School who was teaching kids, some of whom were living in poverty and dealing with gang issues and crime and violence, all of the things that do exist in that community, did back then and unfortunately still do to some degree. And Deborah said, let me go down and spend time with this teacher and these kids. She did. She started taking them on outings, and she found a place where she belonged. She realized that she felt more at home with these young people than she had felt anywhere else. And a year later, she resigned from her job. And the unrest had also happened, and so there was an interweaving of what was happening in Los Angeles in terms of the kind of social fabric and the polarization of class and race and all of those things. And then these kids that Deborah was spending time with who made her feel that she had something to offer. And she raised some money. She got some help from her boss at the time to start a board of directors. And she got some property, some rooms in a church across from Jefferson High School, and she was working with teenagers, some of whom, as I mentioned, already had a foot in gang life or had older siblings or parents who were struggling with poverty and crime in the neighborhood. And she started providing safety and love, and that's really what the DNA of a place called home is, safety and love. A place for kids to come after school and get support, maybe with their homework, get a snack, play a game of pool. It was really recreation and safety in those days. It's gone on to be an awful lot more than that.
Yes, unquestionably so. So a little perspective is that at that point in time, about after the Rodney King riots, the schools actually locked their doors at 3 p.m. So for all intents and purposes, these youth literally had nowhere else to go.
Yeah, those key hours, between 3 and 6 or 7 in the evening is when a lot of the trouble was going down. That's when drugs were being exchanged. That's when kids were getting into trouble, getting pregnant, making bad choices. So there was a lack, and especially in that neighborhood, a lack of services, and Deborah responded to that.
So in the last 26 plus years, things have grown, things have dramatically changed. So a place called home is no longer just 3 rooms in a church. It is actually a large organization, a large facility with a lot of different opportunities for youth to participate in. And it seems to me almost not just a safe haven, but this place of inspiration and this place of promise. And so you're the executive director. You've been there over 10 years now. Exactly how does it work, and what happens inside this area, and where is this area?
Well, it's a lot. A place called home. Good. Yeah, it's an oasis. Right. It's this kind of springboard and portal that sits on the corner of South Central Ave and 29th, and now spans both sides of the street there with our campus. We work with young people from 8 years old into their mid-20s. All the way through college and into a good job. And then we wrap around the families, and we also provide services for the entire community throughout the year, in addition to the many, many services and programs, which include support for education and the arts and mental health counseling and nutrition and athletics, and we have a dance studio and a recording studio, and we're getting kids prepared for college and also prepared for vocational pursuits and careers. And we wrap around the families. We provide wraparound services, counseling, and parenting classes. We help with immigration issues. There's an awful lot going on that corner. And we also distribute to the community food and beds and clothing, books, toys, shoes, you name it. It's a very dynamic and joyful spot.
Okay, so here's the sort of the big question is, if all of this is happening, or things that are untoward or not positive happening just in the general area on the streets, what's the magic transition that takes place when people walk into a place called home? What changes? Why is everything idyllic within the confines when things are not necessarily grand outside?
Sure. Well, I don't want to indicate that we're perfect, but there are a lot of moving parts there, and we're working constantly to improve it. But I'll go back to Deborah. So the DNA of this place, right, which is safety and love and opportunity, and those things inform everything that we do. Now, we've gotten more sophisticated. We do many more things. We serve many more children. The age span has grown. Our relationships in the community have evolved and expanded. We have 109 young people in college right now on our scholarships. But it comes back down to love and safety and opportunity. You spoke at the head of this about how do you feel about the word home and that concept. And I think, feeling like you can be yourself and be safe, and that you're always going to get the encouragement and the nourishment, and not just nourishment for your body, but for your mind and your spirit as well. So a place called home attracts amazing people to be staff and volunteers and funders, supporters for the organization. And we are responsive to what the needs are in the community. That's the other thing, I think, for a nonprofit to live in the questions. What makes us relevant? What's happening now? Because things do change. And the community has changed over the past 26 years in various ways.
What has been going on? Because now you have this really bird's eye view. You have a perspective of what was happening in terms of turmoil citywide, 20-something years ago, and now you see that different problems, things have improved. What has changed in the area that you're in? Not necessarily within the bounds of a place called home, but what have you seen happening because of a place called home?
We've worked with about 20,000 young people over this period, and about 150,000 community members through the various kinds of larger events that we do throughout the year, distribution events, cultural events. We host town hall meetings and candidates debates. We're a polling place. So, we're very involved and very porous with the rest of the community. I think in terms of what's changed, I'll talk first about some of the things that should have changed and haven't so much. There is still a level of systemic and generational poverty in South Los Angeles that is oppressive, and it impacts people in lots of different ways that a lot of folks don't really understand. When your family is living so close to the line and so close to the edge that a parking ticket can send you into a spiral, or you might lose your home because you have a flat tire. I mean, that's how close to the edge so many of the families we're working with are. Families of 4 to 6 people who are living on under $25,000 a year, sometimes way under. Working families who don't have enough food to put on the table, who buy what's on sale in the grocery store and maybe eating cookies for dinner and for breakfast. So there are all of these things happening, still gang violence. This year, as a matter of fact, we've seen a spike in violence in the Newton Division and South Central. We're also in the 9th District of Los Angeles, which is the most impoverished district in Los Angeles. And all of this is 8 or 9 miles away from Beverly Hills, the highest concentration of millionaires, and some billionaires too in the world, right? So that part of it it's challenging. It's disillusioning at times, and it can bring you down. But At a place called home, what we're doing is working on ways to counteract that every single day from the moment a young person walks into and onto our campus. We have a high school on campus, a partnership with Da Vinci Schools, great charter school outfit, called Rise High at APCH, with a focus on foster youth and homeless youth and youth on probation. Now, these are young people who are not getting the support that they need in the general school system, but they can come to a place called home and enroll. And we have 95 students enrolled currently, and get a wraparound, not only for their academic careers, but also, do they need nourishment? Do they need hygiene products? Do they need mental health counseling? The only thing we don't have at a place called home is housing. And we talk about that sometimes too. But we will refer them and we will follow them all the way, our counseling team, to make sure that they get the resources they need. Same thing with the families and the young people we serve.
You've brought up a number of things I want to ask you about, but let's go back to sort of the rudimentary of food. You have incorporated into your program not only serving food, but teaching, self-sustainability and how food ends up on your table, and what that must have stemmed from something very specific. Kids coming in at the end of the day starving to death.
Yeah, I mean, I can share stories with you. There was a girl one day who was putting food in her pockets, and staff noticed this. And we took her aside and said, "What's going on?" She said, "Well, my brother isn't 8 years old yet. He can't come to a place called home. So we start at 8, and he's hungry, so I'm bringing food home." And that was before we have a program called Food for Families now that was partially inspired by that very meeting. Now we're giving away 50 to 100 bags of groceries every week to families that we're case managing. And not just any groceries, Maria. We have 3 gardens ourselves. So the kids are growing organic fruits and veggies. We have an orchard. We have flowers. And then we work with a really wonderful organization called Food Forward, which does something wonderful. They glean food from people's backyards, fallen fruit, but they also have arrangements with all the farmers markets in LA. And at the end of the day, the food that's left over gets reboxed. We receive literally tons and tons of fresh, locally grown, some of it organic produce. And that's what we use in our kitchens, and that's what we distribute to our families. So they're getting great food from a place called home. But I want to emphasize again that these families who don't have enough food, these are working families, most of them. They're not homeless. They have jobs. It's not that they're not trying to make it. But these days, policies from on high have reduced food relief for families in that, at that level of need. So that's part of it. I'll also share that I'm a lifelong gardener, and when I came to a place called Home 10 years ago, I negotiated with our athletic director at the time for a strip of 9 feet in our athletics field, and we dug down and replaced all the soil there with pristine new soil, started a compost bin, and started our first garden. And we now have a 1/4 acre of garden, including a garden at the Newton Police Division. I think of it as the Cops and Community Garden because it's a place where officers and residents in the community can have some positive interaction. So the kids are learning how to grow their own food. They're learning about nutrition and cooking. And we also have a social enterprise program where they're learning how to make products that they can take to market.
What are they making?
Well, one of the favorite things is salad dressing made from our passion fruit. So it's become a bit of a signature item from a place called Home because we have a couple of monster passion fruit vines that produce thousands of these amazing fruit for us. They make candles and they use lavender from the garden. Oh. They make floral arrangements, fresh and dry. And we have a plan. I'll talk a little bit about our growth plans to have a retail store at some point, and the kids will run it with products that they make.
Well, you bring up the point about growth plans. It's a membership organization, and there is a waiting list.
There is.
So with perhaps the proceeds or the focus or the energy generated by these plans? Are you hoping to be able to expand the services and the people that you are able to help?
Yes, all of us go to sleep every night, the board of directors, the staff, myself, knowing that there are 700 folks on our waiting list who can't get in. We are a membership organization. What that means is that we enroll young people. It's not a drop-in where kids come and say, oh, today I'll do art or today I'll do
Play
sports.
basketball, yeah.
They actually come and enroll in classes, and we have sequential learning going on and case management going on. And what we find is that when a family gets involved at a place called home, the children may be 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 years old, and they generally stay with us for 5, 10, 15 years, unless they move so far away that they can't get to us. So very high retention rate, which is wonderful because it allows us to develop meaningful long-term relationships with these young people and their families who we circle around, and to make sure that we can get them on a long-term pathway to self-sufficiency. And a message to them is that they also have something to contribute to the rest of the world. Everything we offer at a place called home is free, all the services and programs. But our expectation is that the young people and the families will be partners, not just consumers, right, of free stuff, but come and make a difference at a place called home, in the surrounding community, in your life, and in the world. So the membership piece of it is open to everybody who we can fit. And so they come and sign up, 1 of 3 times out of the year. And then the summer program, which goes from 8 in the morning until 6:30 in the evening, very full. We also provide around 100 to 120 field trips throughout the year. Oh, wow. And what we find is that once a young person gets involved at a place called home, they stay.
Well, I would imagine so, and that whole idea of taking responsibility for the opportunity is obviously an incredibly important component to this whole thing. So now, after 20-something years, you probably can see inside the organization what has happened with individuals and what has happened with families. Sure. And how all of that has actually, I would imagine, I can't fathom it's not been anything but profoundly positive and incredibly inspiring. You have previous members come back and help? Do you have, what did you have them tell you where they're going to school? I mean, what are some of the things that you get to hear about?
Yeah, well, it's one of the blessings, of working at a place like this, and I feel really grateful and fortunate every single day because miracles are happening all around us. We have this remarkable staff of 80 that are working with youth all over this campus and in the gardens out in the community. And the kids respond. I mean, they own the place. They start thinking about what they want to do with their lives. We've sent 430-something young people to college, all first in their families. And we circle around them while they're in college to make sure that they have what they need to succeed. And now we have the vocational preparation and placement program as well. So yes, we have young people, many, who come back to a place called home on their college breaks or after they graduate. We have several who have come back to work at a place called home. Lots of interns. Our young people are interning throughout the year at a place called home. And it always feels like we're bursting at the seams, So back to your question about growth a little bit, which I didn't really fully respond to. We have been growing for the past 10 years. I arrived there right at the height of the recession, and the organization was struggling in a lot of ways, but has a wonderful board of directors that was committed to kind of taking it into its next evolutionary stage. And we have grown. We opened one new building about 2 years ago, which is now our Teen and Young Adult Services Center called The Bridge, and it has a theater and a gallery that serves the community as well. And we are now in the very early stages of planning a doubling of the size of our campus so that we can welcome hundreds more young people and families onto our campus every single day and take some of the things we're doing to another level. Make sure that the technology and the art studios and everything we're doing is really state of the art.
I have a passion for the arts. I certainly have, limited skills, but I'm a huge advocate. Have you noticed that the arts are transformative with these youth that perhaps were not necessarily exposed to them on their daily, life?
Yes. Well, my own experience is that the arts, I think, saved my life.
Well, you're a screenwriter.
So I have been a writer. I've been a painter. I dabble in music. I do a lot of things that feed my own soul, that nourish my spirit, and we see that happens with young people as well. They find their voice. So at a place called Home, there's visual art studios, there's a music studio. We teach 15 different instruments and theory and composition. We have a recording studio. We have a dance studio with a dance company, 2 bands that are performing regularly, and the kids get to hang out with some amazing artists who come to visit us. Our band has played with Stevie Wonder, and Ozo Motley, and they opened for Diana Ross a few years back. And our dance company, when Alvin Ailey is in town, we get a company member to come down and teach a master class. So at a place called Home, anything can happen. And the kids know that. They come every day and they realize they don't know who they're going to meet, what's going to happen, what field trip are they going to go on. We had a young person this past summer interning at JPL. And at the end of his internship, they offered him a job.
Wow.
I mean, this young person is now on a pathway to becoming, a NASA engineer. So anything can happen at a place called Home, and usually does.
You mentioned that the art saved your life and that you've been with the organization for 10 years. How did you end up there? Because...
Yeah, honestly, 35 years ago, I really didn't know anything about nonprofit. I certainly would never have imagined myself running a nonprofit. But I have a brother who has been on and off the streets for many, many years, suffers from schizophrenia, and he has been the greatest teacher in my life. And when I came to LA, I got involved with an organization that was doing theater work in psychiatric and prison and homeless settings. And it was a way for me to have some vicarious impact on folks who were struggling with the same issues that my brother has struggled with for so many years. And I was at that organization and working there as a volunteer and as a teaching artist. And then the riots happened. And right as that happened, I became the director of that organization. I was still writing scripts, I was still directing and acting, but I found something that ignited not just a passion in me, but my mother always used to say to me, just make yourself useful. And I found that when I was doing that work, I felt the most useful I'd ever felt. So I started doing that. I ran that organization for a while and started something then called the School Project, which went on to spawn another organization, Inside Out Community Arts, that I co-founded with a friend. And then I ended up running that organization for 15 or 16 years. I tried to maintain an entertainment career for part of that time, but at a certain point, I just said to my agent, just get on my board and stop asking me to write stuff because I don't have time anymore. And there I was running that organization when I got a knock on the door from a place called Home in 2009, early 2009. And they said, listen, we have this organization. It's got great DNA. The need is incredibly strong in this neighborhood, but we're struggling. Would you consider coming and helping us turn this thing around? And then began a conversation with the board of directors that ultimately led to a lot of meditation and finally a decision to come on board and see if I could be useful. And I hope I have been. It's been a very dynamic decade, and we're doing a lot of things. And I certainly.
Well, I don't think there's a question.
Well,
you've definitely been an incredibly inspirational component to this whole thing. But you have said a couple times now that, a great board of directors, great volunteers,
great
the intern program.
Yeah.
So a nonprofit, lives and dies by the kindness of strangers. And so if you could put a wish list out there for whatever angels you would want to help you continue and grow and expand and all these great ideas that you have. What is it that you are looking for? Who can help, even if they may not be able to write you an enormous check to buy a big piece of property or something?
Yeah, yeah. Well, of course, any kind of financial support is helpful. It doesn't matter whether it's $2 or $200,000. It makes a difference, and at a place called home, it gets put to good use. I would welcome all of your viewers to volunteer. Get onto our website. You know, there are many, many ways to get involved. If you're interested in gardening or education or music or mental health or nutrition, college readiness, all of those programs can use volunteers. You can get involved hands-on. You can get involved as a partner, as a supporter, as a board member. There's really almost no end of opportunity at a place called home. Mentoring.
Yeah,
so we have a one-on-one mentoring program called Life Mentoring. And outside adults can come. They are heavily vetted. They learn about a place called home. And then there's a process by which they are matched with one of our teens for a full 1-year commitment with a minimum of 2 outings per month. That is a life-changing program, not just for the young person, but also for the mentor. So please, yeah, come get involved. Companies can get involved, you know, as sponsors and send groups of volunteers.
So I'm going to give you a little bit of an attaboy, because in doing my, due diligence, your level of transparency is wonderful. 4 stars on Charity Navigator, read through all your financials and your tax returns. You have really created an organization that not only does good work, but is willing to explain and share how and why you're doing it. So that's also adds a level of confidence to someone who wants to get involved in your organization.
Well, thank you for noticing that. Transparency is our religion at a place called home. We believe that if there's a problem, it shouldn't be covered up. It should actually be exposed to the light, and then we can really work on solving it. So yes, we publish all of our financials. Our newsletters are online as well. And that's my promise. That's my pledge to the board of directors and to our funders. But it's also a part of the culture at a place called home. Every staff person there understands that if it's a choice between doing something sort of quick and dirty and taking the shortcut or doing it the right way, it isn't a choice. You don't need to ask anybody. Do it the right way. And, we're always learning. We're always kind of figuring out how to be better and do better at what we do. But thank you very much for noticing that.
No, it's good. And finally, the organization is brave, because working with teens, I would imagine, has its own set of issues. So that's
I have one of those myself.
Yeah, well, there you go. That whole Bridge Center is really engaging and interesting.
It is, and teens vote with their feet. Nobody's forced to come to a place called home. So part of our job is to keep them engaged. Everything we do there is fun. It's joyful. It's stimulating. It's engaging, and it's designed to propel these kids forward in their story. As competent, self-sufficient contributors to the community.
Why 8 years old, by the way? What is it at 8?
That was in place when I got there.
Okay.
It's 2nd grade. And I think what it really has to do with is developmental stages. Because if we go younger, we really need to have a separate space and a separate skill set and staff that have been trained to work with those younger kids. Now, I will share with you that I have staff that are lobbying for that all the time. They want all the way from preschool on up. Oh. So when we grow, and we are planning to grow, that is something that's on the table.
So if anybody wants to get more information, all they need to do is log on apch.org.
That is correct. That's our website, fun place to visit. And Maria, we say at a place called home, changing the world starts at home. Right? And it means it starts inside each one of us. So I'd love to see you down there, and I hope your viewers will join us as well.
Well, I can't wait. And thank you so much, Jonathan, for being with us.
My pleasure.
And thank you for watching LA Currents.